James Morrison woke up before the sun that cold morning, just like he did every day. His small ranch in New Mexico wasn't much to look at. The cabin had cracks in the walls and his cattle were so few he could count them on his fingers. But it was his, and he'd worked hard for 3 years to keep it going. He pulled on his worn boots and grabbed his rifle, not because he wanted trouble, but because you never knew what you'd find out here in the wilderness. The morning air was so cold it hurt to breathe, and frost covered everything like a white blanket. James saddled up his old horse and headed toward the fence line near the foothills. Some of his fence posts had been loose and he needed to fix them before his few cattle wandered off. Money was tight, and losing even one cow would be a disaster. The sun started peeking over the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink. It was beautiful out here, even if life was hard. That's when he saw something strange near his water trough. 2 dark shapes on the ground that shouldn't be there. His heart started beating faster. Could be dead animals. Could be something worse. He rode closer, keeping his hand near his rifle. As he got within 20 feet, he realized they were people. 2 women lying on the cold ground. James jumped off his horse and rushed over. Both women were Apache. He could tell from their clothing and the way they wore their hair. What shocked him was how tall they were. Even lying down, he could see they were nearly as tall as him, maybe 6 feet. You didn't see that often. One woman was completely still, her eyes closed. The other one looked at him with dark eyes that held both fear and warning. Both had cuts and scratches all over their arms and legs. Their clothes were torn and there was dried blood on their hands. James knew he was in a tough spot. Helping Apache people could get him in serious trouble with the other ranchers and the army. They'd call him a traitor. They might even burn down his ranch. But leaving these women to die? That wasn't something he could do. His mama raised him better than that. He spoke softly, trying not to scare them more. "I'm not gonna hurt you. Let me help." The conscious woman didn't say anything, just watched him like a hawk watches a mouse. She was trying to figure out if he was dangerous. James went to his horse and grabbed his blanket. He came back slowly and knelt down. "You're hurt bad." "I got a cabin. It's warm. Got medicine." He started to reach for the unconscious woman when the other one grabbed his wrist. Her grip was strong, even though she was injured. She said something in Apache, words he couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear. "Don't hurt my sister. I promise," James said, looking right into her eyes. "I'm trying to help." Something in his face must have convinced her because she let go of his wrist. James carefully picked up the unconscious woman. She was burning with fever, and that worried him a lot. Fever could kill you out here faster than a bullet. He laid her gently in the back of his small wagon, then helped the other woman climb up. She could barely move, wincing with every step. Once they were both in the wagon, James climbed onto the driver's seat and turned his horse toward home. That's when he felt it. That feeling of being watched. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. James looked toward the tree line, toward the pine and cottonwood trees about 100 yards away. At first he didn't see anything. Then the sun hit just right and he saw them. Eyes. Dozens of pairs of eyes reflecting the morning light. People standing in the shadows between the trees, completely still, just watching. His mouth went dry. He couldn't tell how many there were. 20? 30? More? They weren't moving, weren't making a sound. Just watching to see what this white rancher would do with their women. James swallowed hard. His hand wanted to reach for his rifle, but he knew that would be stupid. If they wanted him dead, he'd already be dead. An arrow would be in his chest before he could blink. Instead, he just nodded toward the trees. A small nod of respect. Then he clicked his tongue and got his horse moving toward the cabin. He didn't look back, but he could feel those eyes on him the whole way. It felt like the longest ride of his life. When he finally reached his cabin, James looked over his shoulder. The tree line was far away now, but he could still see figures there. They'd followed, staying in the woods, keeping pace with his wagon. They were making sure he took their people somewhere safe. James understood. If someone took his sister, he'd follow too. He'd want to know she was okay. These people weren't savages like the newspapers said. They were family worried about their own. He carried the unconscious woman inside first, laying her on his own bed. Then he helped the other one inside. His cabin was small, just one room with a fireplace, a bed, a table, and not much else. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and dry. The conscious woman immediately went to her sister's side, touching her face, speaking in Apache. James could hear the worry in her voice. He grabbed his bucket and went outside to get water from the well. When he came back to the tree line, the watchers were still there. He could see them better now in the growing daylight. Men, mostly, warriors with weapons. But they weren't attacking. They were waiting. James went back inside and started heating water over the fire. He had some whiskey for cleaning wounds and some cloth he could tear up for bandages. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The conscious woman watched everything he did with suspicious eyes. She was protecting her sister, ready to fight even though she was hurt herself. James respected that kind of loyalty. He brought the warm water and clean cloth over to the bed. "I need to clean these cuts," he said slowly, pointing at the wounds. "Or they'll get infected. You understand?" "Infected?" The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded just once. James got to work, carefully cleaning the wounds on the unconscious woman first. Some of the cuts were deep and he worried they might need stitches, but he did his best, cleaning them with whiskey and wrapping them with strips of cloth. The woman with the fever never woke up. That scared him more than the eyes in the woods. Fever meant infection, and infection could spread fast. When he finished with the unconscious sister, he turned to the other woman. "Your turn," he said gently. She shook her head and pointed at her sister. "I know you want to stay with her," James said. "But you're hurt too. Let me help. Then you can sit right here beside her. I promise." Finally, she agreed. James cleaned her wounds too, and she didn't make a sound even though he knew it must have hurt like fire when the whiskey hit the open cuts. She was tough, tougher than most men he knew. When he was done, James made them some soup from the rabbit he'd caught the day before. The conscious woman ate a little, then tried to get her sister to drink some broth. Most of it just ran down her chin, but a little bit went down her throat. As the sun set that first day, James pulled his chair up near the fire and sat down with his rifle across his lap. Not because he was scared of the women, but because he didn't know what the night would bring. Those eyes in the woods hadn't gone away. Every time he looked out the window, he could see small fires flickering between the trees. The Apache were camping out there, keeping watch, waiting to see what would happen to their people. James knew his life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. But as he looked at the two injured women, one fighting fever and one fighting to stay awake to protect her sister, he knew he'd made the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing was the most dangerous thing you could do, but it was still right. He settled in for a long night, feeding the fire to keep the cabin warm and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Outside in the darkness, dozens of eyes watched and waited, ready for whatever came next. The first night was the hardest. James barely slept, sitting in his chair by the fire and checking on the two women every hour. The one with the fever kept getting worse. She'd shake and sweat, then get cold and shiver. He'd never felt so helpless in his life. The other woman never left her sister's side. Even though she was hurt and exhausted, she stayed awake, wiping her sister's face with a wet cloth and whispering to her in Apache. James didn't need to understand the words to know what she was saying. Prayers, maybe, or just telling her sister to hold on to keep fighting. When morning came, James stepped outside to check on the watchers. They were still there, more of them now. He counted at least 30 people among the trees. Some were cooking breakfast over small fires. Others just stood there watching his cabin. It was clear they weren't going anywhere. James did something that probably wasn't too smart but felt right. He waved at them. Just a simple wave like you'd give a neighbor. A few of them shifted, surprised maybe, but nobody waved back. Fair enough, he thought. They didn't know him. Didn't know if he was friend or enemy yet. He went back inside and made breakfast. Just cornmeal mush and some dried beef, nothing fancy. The conscious woman was still awake, her eyes red from no sleep. He brought her a bowl. "You need to eat," he said. "Can't take care of her if you don't take care of yourself." She looked at him for a long time, then took the bowl. She ate slowly, never taking her eyes off her sister. James ate his own breakfast and tried to think. He had maybe a week's worth of food left, and that was before he had 2 extra mouths to feed. His nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and he wasn't exactly friendly. Most of the ranchers around here hated the Apache. Going to town for supplies might mean questions he couldn't answer. But first things first. He needed to get that fever down. James had some willow bark tea his wife used to make before she passed. It helped with fevers and pain. He'd never used it himself, being stubborn about such things, but he still had some in a jar. He heated water and made the tea, then brought it to the bedside. The conscious woman watched him carefully as he lifted her sister's head and tried to get her to drink. Most of it spilled, but some went down. It was better than nothing. "What's her name?" James asked, pointing at the sick woman. The conscious woman didn't answer at first. Then, very quietly, she said, "Kaya." Her English was rough but understandable. James felt a little hope. If she could speak English, they could talk. "That might help, Kaya," James repeated, nodding. "And you?" "Desba," she said. "I'm James," he said, pointing at himself. "This is my home. You're safe here, Desba. I promise." Desba's eyes searched his face like she was trying to read his soul. Whatever she saw there must have been okay because she nodded just a little. The second day was a bit better. Kaya's fever broke around noon, and she opened her eyes for the first time. She looked confused and scared, talking fast in Apache to Desba. Her sister held her hand and spoke back, calming her down. James stayed back, giving them space. When Kaya finally looked at him, her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She was taking in everything about him, about the cabin, figuring out the situation. She said something to Desba. "She wants to know why you help us," Desba translated. "White men don't help Apache." James thought about that. "Well," he said slowly, "I don't know about other white men, but my mama taught me that when someone's hurt, you help them. Doesn't matter who they are." Desba translated, and Kaya's expression softened just a tiny bit. Over the next few days, things settled into a routine. James would wake up at dawn, check outside to see the watchers still there among the trees, then come back to make breakfast. Desba started helping despite her injuries, refusing to just sit around. She'd stir the pot or fold blankets, always doing something. Kaya was healing too, though slower. The fever had taken a lot out of her. But she was tough and more alert every day. On the third morning, Desba finally told him what happened. Her English wasn't perfect, but James understood enough. "Soldiers came," she said, her voice hard. "We were at camp. Peaceful camp. Just families. Children. The soldiers, they said we must go to reservation. My father, he tried to talk. He said we hunt here, live here long time. Our land." She paused, her jaw tight with anger. "They shoot. Not in air. They shoot at people. At children. We fight back. Have to, many die. We run to mountains. Get separated from father, from others." James felt sick to his stomach. He'd heard stories like this before, but hearing it from someone who lived through it was different. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "We walk for days," Desba continued. "Hurt, lost, Kaya gets fever. I think we die. Then we see your water. We drink and we fall. Too tired. Thought maybe we die there. Then you came." She looked at him directly. "Why you not tell soldiers?" "Yesterday I see soldiers ride on road. They not far. You could call them. Get reward maybe." James had seen those soldiers too. A patrol passing by on the main trail. His cabin was set back from the road, so they hadn't stopped. But he could have ridden out to them, could have turned Desba and Kaya in. "Didn't seem right," he said simply. "You weren't hurting anybody. You were just hurt." Desba studied him again with those sharp eyes. Then she stood up, walked to the window, and did something that surprised him. She opened the door and stepped outside. James followed, worried she might fall or hurt herself more. But Desba walked toward the tree line, toward the watchers. She raised her hand and called out something in Apache. The response was immediate. People stepped out from behind trees. James's heart pounded as he saw them clearly for the first time. Warriors with weapons, yes, but also women and children. Families. They'd all been out there in the cold, watching and waiting. An older man walked forward from the group. He was tall and walked with authority. His face was weathered from years in the sun, and his eyes were the same shape as Desba's. Desba spoke to him in Apache, talking fast and gesturing back at the cabin, at James. The old man listened, asked questions, and listened some more. Finally, he turned to James. In surprisingly good English, he said, "I am Natan, father of Desba and Kaya." James nodded respectfully. "James Morrison. This is my ranch. You saved my daughters," Natan said. "It wasn't a question. I helped them," James said. "Anyone would have." "No," Natan said firmly. "Not anyone. Most would kill or call soldiers." He looked back at his people in the trees, then at James. "You are brave man or foolish man? Maybe both." James almost smiled at that. "Probably both," he admitted. Natan walked closer, and James noticed several warriors tense, ready to move if their leader was threatened. But Nathan just extended his hand. James shook it. "We watch you 3 days," Natan said. "We see you care for my daughters. Give food, give medicine. You have little, but you share. This tells us who you are." "They needed help," James said. "Still do. Kaya's getting stronger, but she needs more time." Natan nodded. "We know, we wait. We watch. We see soldiers come close yesterday. You don't call them. You protect my daughters." "I wasn't going to turn them in," James said. "We know this now," Natan agreed. "That is why I come to talk. My people, we are hiding in mountains. Soldiers hunt us. We need time to go further away to safe place. But my daughters, they too hurt to travel far. I ask you, can they stay here a little longer? Until strong enough?" James didn't even have to think about it. "Of course. They can stay as long as they need. This brings danger to you," Natan warned. "Soldiers come back, find them, you will have trouble." "Then we'll deal with that if it happens," James said. Natan looked at him for a long moment, then said something that changed everything. "You help us, we help you. I see your ranch, small, difficult, you are alone. We can help. Bring food. Watch for danger. Teach you about land. Fair trade, yes?" James was stunned. He hadn't expected this. "You don't have to do that. You don't have to save my daughters," Natan pointed out. "But you do. We are Apache. We don't forget debts. We don't forget friends." And just like that, James Morrison went from being a poor, struggling rancher to having an entire Apache band watching his back. It was the strangest alliance and probably the most dangerous thing he'd ever agreed to. But standing there, shaking Natan's hand while dozens of eyes watched from the woods, it felt right. It felt like the beginning of something important, something that might actually matter in this harsh, unforgiving land where people usually only looked out for themselves. That night, Desba told Kaya everything that happened. Kaya looked at James and said something in Apache. Desba smiled just a little. "She says you have good heart," Desba translated. "She says she will remember." James nodded, suddenly feeling embarrassed. "Just doing what's right," he muttered. But deep down, he knew this was more than just doing what's right. This was choosing a side in a war that wasn't really his fight. This was deciding that some things mattered more than staying safe. Outside, the fires in the woods burned a little brighter that night. The watchers were still there, but they weren't watching for threats anymore. They were watching over one of their own who had, against all odds, found an ally in the most unlikely place. 5 days after James found the sisters, everything changed. He was outside fixing a broken fence post when he heard horses coming. Multiple horses moving fast. His stomach dropped. He knew that sound. Military patrol. James looked toward the cabin. Desba was inside with Kaya, who was finally strong enough to sit up and walk a little. He looked toward the tree line. The watchers had pulled back deeper into the woods during daylight, but he knew they were there. He put down his tools and walked toward the front of his property as 5 riders came into view. A lieutenant and 4 soldiers, all wearing Union cavalry blues. The lieutenant was young, maybe 30, with cold eyes that saw everything. "Morning," James called out, trying to sound casual. His heart was pounding so hard he thought they might hear it. "Morning," the lieutenant said, pulling his horse to a stop. "I'm Lieutenant Crawford. We're searching for hostile Apache who escaped from a relocation convoy 2 weeks ago." "Haven't seen any Apache," James said. It wasn't quite a lie. He hadn't seen them when they escaped. He'd found them after. Crawford looked at the cabin, at the small ranch, at everything. "You live here alone?" "Yes, sir," James said. "Just me and my cattle. Quiet place," Crawford said. "Good place to hide someone." "Got nothing to hide," James said, keeping his voice steady. "Just trying to make a living." Crawford dismounted and the other soldiers did the same. "We've been tracking 2 Apache women. Tall ones, unusual. They killed 3 soldiers during the escape. Dangerous criminals." James felt anger flash through him. "Killed 3 soldiers, or defended themselves and their people from an attack. Depending on who told the story. Like I said, haven't seen anyone," James repeated. Crawford walked closer. "You know it's a crime to harbor fugitives, right? Especially hostile Indians. Could lose your land. Could go to prison." "I understand the law, Lieutenant," James said carefully. "Then you won't mind if we search your property," Crawford said. It wasn't a question. James's mind raced. If he said no, they'd know something was wrong. If he said yes, they'd find Desba and Kaya. Either way, he was in trouble. "Got nothing to hide," James said again. "But my cabin's small and messy. Wasn't expecting company." Crawford smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We've seen worse. He nodded to his men. Search the cabin and the barn. 2 soldiers started walking toward the cabin. James wanted to run to block the door, to do something, but he just stood there frozen. This was it. This was where his decision to help 2 injured women would cost him everything. The soldiers were 10 feet from the cabin door when it happened. An arrow hit the ground right in front of the lead soldier. He jumped back yelling and pulled his rifle up. The arrow was still vibrating in the dirt, perfectly placed. "Not to kill, but to warn. Contact," one of the soldiers shouted. Everyone spun around, weapons raised. And that's when they saw them, Apache warriors, dozens of them, stepping out from behind trees, from behind rocks, from places they'd been hiding in plain sight. They'd surrounded the patrol completely. James's mouth went dry. He'd known the watchers were out there, but seeing them all at once was something else. There had to be 40 warriors, maybe more. Each one had a bow or a rifle, all aimed at the soldiers. Crawford's face went pale. His men grouped together, back to back, rifles pointing in all directions. They were outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. An older warrior stepped forward. It was Natan. He held no weapon, just raised his hand in a stopping gesture. He spoke in English so everyone could understand. "You leave now," Natan said calmly. "This man is under our protection. You don't search his home." Crawford tried to regain his authority. "This is United States territory. You can't what?" Natan interrupted. "Can't protect a friend? Can't defend our people? You hunt us like animals. You lie about why. Say we are hostile, but we only fight when attacked. This man, he helps us when we need help. We help him now." "Those women are criminals," Crawford insisted, though his voice shook a little. "They killed soldiers. Soldiers who shot children." Desba's voice rang out. James turned to see her standing in the cabin doorway. She was still hurt, still healing, but she stood tall and proud. "Soldiers who came to peaceful camp and opened fire. We defended ourselves. That is not crime. That is survival." Crawford pointed at her. "There, that's one of them." Men arrest, multiple arrows drew back in multiple bows. The sound of 40 bowstrings creaking tight filled the air. Crawford's words died in his throat. "You are 5, Natan said quietly. "We are many. You are far from help. We are home. Think carefully about what you do next, Lieutenant." The standoff lasted forever, though it was probably only a minute. Crawford looked at his men, at the warriors, at James. He was doing the math in his head. 5 against 40. Miles from the nearest fort. If shooting started, they'd all die before reinforcements arrived. "This isn't over," Crawford finally said. "I'll be back with more men." "A lot more men." "Maybe," Natan agreed. "But not today. Today you leave." Crawford mounted his horse, his movements stiff with barely controlled fear and anger. His men did the same, keeping their rifles ready but not aimed. They backed their horses up, not turning their backs on the warriors. "You're making a big mistake, Morrison," Crawford called out. "Aiding the enemy. That's treason." "They're not my enemy," James said, surprised by how steady his voice was. "They're just people trying to survive." Crawford's face twisted with anger, but he didn't say anything else. He turned his horse and rode away, his men following close behind. The patrol moved fast, eager to get away from the arrows that followed their backs. Nobody moved until the soldiers were completely out of sight. Then slowly the warriors lowered their weapons. Some melted back into the trees, others stayed visible, still on guard. James realized he'd been holding his breath. He let it out in a long whoosh and sat down hard on the ground. His legs felt like water. Naughton walked over and sat down beside him. "Close," the old man said. "Too close," James agreed. "They'll come back." Crawford meant that. "Yes," Natan said. "With more soldiers. Maybe in a few days, maybe in a few weeks. But they will come." Desba came out of the cabin, walking carefully. Kaya appeared behind her, leaning on the door frame. Both sisters looked worried. "We bring danger to you," Desba said to James. "Maybe we should go. Hide somewhere else." James shook his head. "No, you're not healed enough yet. Besides, where would you go? They're looking for you everywhere." "Then what we do?" Kaya asked. Her English was rougher than Desba's, but getting better each day. James stood up and looked at all of them. The sisters, Natan, the warriors who had just saved his life by stopping that search. An idea was forming in his mind. A crazy idea, but maybe crazy was what they needed. "We fight," he said. "Not with weapons. With words. With truth. We get proof of what really happened. We tell the real story." "White men don't care about real story," Natan said sadly. "They care about land. About gold. About power. Some don't care, James admitted. But some do. There are good people out there. People in the territorial government who want to do right. We just need to reach them before Crawford comes back with an army. Desba looked at him curiously. How we do this? I know a lawyer in Santa Fe, James said, thinking out loud. Good man, fair man. He helped me buy this land legal. If we can get to him, tell him what happened, show him your injuries, get your testimony written down proper. Maybe we got a chance, maybe, Natan said doubtfully. Or maybe they just arrest us all. Maybe, James agreed. But doing nothing means Crawford comes back and people die. Your people, maybe me too. At least this way we're trying something. The warriors talked among themselves in Apache, debating. James couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Some were angry, some were scared, some were willing to try. Finally, Natan stood up. We try your way, he decided. But if it doesn't work, if it's trap, we fight. We don't go to reservation. We don't let them take our freedom. Fair enough, James said. Kaya spoke up, her voice weak but determined. I go with you. Tell what happened. Show my wounds. Let them see truth. Me too, Desba added. James looked at the two sisters, still healing, still in pain but willing to put themselves in danger to tell their story. It took guts. More guts than most people had. It's a 3-day ride to Santa Fe, James warned. Hard ride. You sure you're up for it? We're up for it, Desba said firmly. That evening they made plans. Natan would take most of his people deeper into the mountains, away from the patrol routes. A few warriors would shadow James, Desba, and Kaya on the road to Santa Fe, staying hidden but ready to help if needed. James packed what little food he had. The Apache brought dried meat and travel bread, enough for the journey. They'd leave at dawn before Crawford could organize reinforcements. As the sun set, James sat outside his cabin and looked at the stars. His quiet, lonely life had exploded into something dangerous and complicated. He'd gone from a struggling rancher to someone harboring fugitives, making alliances with Apache warriors, and planning to challenge the United States Army. His wife would have thought he was crazy. Maybe he was. But he'd also never felt more sure about anything in his life. Desba came and sat beside him. You risk everything for us, she said quietly. Why? James thought about that. My wife died 3 years ago. Fever took her, same fever Kaya had. I sat with her for days trying everything, but nothing worked. They never made it to Santa Fe. Not that first week, anyway. The second day of their planned journey, a storm hit. Not just rain, but one of those violent desert storms that turns the sky black and the wind into a living thing. James knew they couldn't travel in it, so they took shelter in a small canyon he knew about. While they waited out the weather, something unexpected happened. Kaya, who'd been quiet and weak since the fever, suddenly pointed to a rock formation and started talking rapidly in Apache to Desba. What's she saying? James asked. Desba looked excited. She says she knows this place. Our band used to camp near here every summer. There's a cave big enough for many people, hidden, safe. The storm raged for 2 days. During that time, hiding in the canyon, James and the sisters talked more than they ever had. Really talked. And James began to understand something important. These people didn't need him to speak for them in Santa Fe. They needed something else entirely. They needed a bridge between two worlds, a way to survive in a land that was changing fast, where the old ways were dying, but the new ways were hostile to their very existence. When the storm cleared, James made a decision. I think we should go back to the ranch, he said. Desba looked confused. But the lawyer, the testimony, can wait, James said. I've been thinking. Going to Santa Fe, getting papers, telling our story to some government man, that might help short-term. But long-term, you need more than that. You need a way to live, to actually survive out here without running forever. How we do that? Kaya asked. James had been working on this idea during the storm. We work together. Your people know this land better than anyone. You know where water is, where game runs, which plants are medicine and which are poison. You know how to live here. Me, I know the law. I know how to deal with settlers and merchants. I know how to make things official, legal. What you saying? Desba asked carefully. I'm saying we become partners, real partners. We share the land, share the work, share the profits. We create something new. A ranch where Apache and whites work side by side. Show people it can be done. Natan, who'd arrived with supplies the night before, sat listening. Now he spoke up. White men don't partner with Apache. They take, they push, they kill. That is how it has always been. Then let's be the first to do it different, James said. Look, I know I'm just one man with a small ranch, but it's a start. And if it works, if we can prove that our two people can live together peaceful-like, maybe others will see. Maybe things can change. You have big dreams, Natan said, but there was something in his voice. Not quite hope, but not complete dismissal either. Big dreams are all I got, James admitted. That and this stubborn idea that people are people, no matter what they look like or what language they speak. They talked long into the night. Natan brought up good points. What about the army? What about hostile settlers? What about the dozens of ways this could fail and get people killed? James didn't have answers to everything. But he had determination. And he had something else. He had Desba and Kaya, two women who'd survived what should have killed them and were still fighting to protect their people. I have idea, Kaya said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. She still didn't talk much, but when she did, people listened. Horses, horses? James repeated. Kaya nodded. I see your horses, wild, angry. You have hard time with them. I can fix. I know horses. Teach them, gentle them, make them good. We sell them. Make money, show we can work together. James thought about his small herd of difficult horses. He'd bought them cheap because nobody else could handle them. They were half wild and mean as snakes. He'd been planning to sell them for meat eventually, taking a loss. You really think you can gentle them? He asked Kaya. She just smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her. Watch me. And so they went back to the ranch. Not in defeat, but with a new plan. A harder plan, maybe, but one that felt right. Over the next few weeks, something amazing happened. Kaya worked with the horses every single day. At first, James was worried she'd get hurt. The horses were truly wild, bucking and biting. But Kaya had a way with them that seemed like magic. She'd stand near them, not touching, just being present. She'd hum songs in Apache, low and soothing. She'd bring them treats, but never force them to take the food. Slowly, impossibly, the horses began to trust her. Within a month, she had the meanest horse in the herd eating from her hand. Within 2 months, she was riding it. Not with a saddle and bridle and all the gear James used. Just a simple rope and her own balance. The horse moved like they were one being. Word started to spread. A rancher 5 miles away heard about the Apache woman who could gentle any horse. He came by, suspicious and hostile at first. But when he saw Kaya work, his attitude changed. I got a stallion that's been nothing but trouble, he admitted. Paid good money for him, but he's too mean to ride. Was gonna shoot him. Think she could help? James looked at Kaya. She nodded. The rancher, a hard man named Peterson, brought his stallion. It was a beautiful animal, but truly dangerous. It had kicked Peterson's son so hard the boy's leg never healed right. The horse had hate in its eyes. Kaya worked with that horse for 2 weeks. James watched sometimes, amazed by her patience. She got kicked once, a glancing blow that left a bruise the size of a plate on her thigh. But she never got angry, never gave up. At the end of 2 weeks, Peterson came back. Kaya walked the stallion out, calm as a Sunday morning. Peterson's mouth dropped open. I'll be damned, he whispered. She handed him the rope. Talk to him soft, she instructed in her careful English. Never angry. He remembers angry. Show him you're different now. Peterson worked with his horse under Kaya's guidance for another week. By the end, he could ride the stallion. Not perfectly, not like Kaya could, but ride him nonetheless. What do I owe you? Peterson asked James. Before James could answer, Kaya spoke up. We are partners, she said, gesturing to herself, Desba, and James. We work together. You pay fair price. Peterson looked surprised, then thoughtful. He paid in silver coins, more than James had seen in months. After Peterson left, more people came. Some wanted horses trained. Others had heard about the Apache who knew medicine plants and came with sick children or mysterious ailments. Desba knew things about healing that amazed James. Plants that reduced fever, roots that helped with pain, herbs that cleaned wounds better than whiskey. She was careful, though. She'd only help people who asked respectfully. If someone came demanding or treating her like a servant, she'd refuse. James backed her up on that. Partners, he'd remind people. Not servants, partners. Nathan and his people began coming around more openly. At first, they'd only come at night. But as they saw that James's ranch was becoming a safe place, they got bolder. Warriors would stop by to trade game for flour or sugar. Women would bring beautiful baskets to sell. James started keeping records of everything. Who traded what? Who paid what? He wanted it all legal and documented. If the army came back, he wanted proof that this was a legitimate business operation, not a hideout for fugitives. The arrangement worked well. The Apache got access to goods they needed. James got help running the ranch and knowledge that made him a better rancher. And slowly, carefully, they were building something neither could have built alone. But not everyone was happy about it. One night, 3 men from town showed up at James's ranch. They'd been drinking and they weren't friendly. "We don't like what you're doing here, Morrison," their leader, a man called Sutton, said. Sutton owned the biggest ranch in the area and had wanted James's water rights for years. "Don't recall asking what you like," James replied calmly. He was standing on his porch and he'd positioned himself in front of the door. Inside, Desba and Kaya were listening. "Consorting with savages," Sutton spat. "Trading with them, living with them. It ain't natural. It ain't right." "Last I checked, this is my land," James said. "I'll trade with whoever I want." "You're making the rest of us look bad," another man chimed in. "How are we supposed to justify clearing out the Apache when you're proving they can be civilized?" And there it was. The real problem. James wasn't just helping the Apache. He was challenging the narrative that they were nothing but violent savages who needed to be removed or destroyed. He was proving they were people, capable of partnership and growth. "Get off my land," James said quietly. "Or what?" Sutton sneered. "You gonna shoot us?" James didn't answer. He didn't need to. Behind Sutton and his friends, shadows moved in the darkness. Warriors, unseen until now, stepped into the firelight. There were at least a dozen of them. Sutton's face went white. His friends reached for their guns, but arrows were already aimed at their hearts. "You got off my land," James repeated. "Now." They left, cursing and making threats. But they left. After they were gone, Natan came up on the porch. "This problem will grow," he said. "Men like Sutton, they don't forget. They don't forgive." "I know," James said. "But we keep going anyway. We prove this can work. Eventually, enough people will see it that men like Sutton won't matter anymore." Natan put his hand on James's shoulder. "You have warrior's heart," he said. "Not with weapons, but with spirit. My daughters chose well when they trusted you." Inside the cabin that night, the 3 of them sat around the fire. It had been 2 months since James found the sisters near death by his water trough. Winter came hard to New Mexico that year. The snow piled high and temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid in buckets overnight. James had always struggled through winters alone, barely surviving on rationed food and praying his cattle wouldn't freeze to death. This winter was different. Kaya had fully recovered from her fever, and what James discovered was that her gift with horses went beyond just training. She understood animals in a way that seemed almost magical. She could tell when a cow was about to get sick before any symptoms showed. She knew which horses needed extra food and which ones were just being greedy. The animals trusted her completely. One morning, James woke to find Kaya already outside in the freezing cold, working with a pregnant mare that had been struggling. The mare was one of his best, but she'd been acting strange for days, refusing food and pacing nervously. "What's wrong with her?" James asked, bringing Kaya a cup of hot coffee. Kaya accepted the coffee gratefully, her breath making clouds in the cold air. "Baby is wrong position," she said. "Not ready to be born, but trying anyway. Makes mother scared. Can you help her?" James asked worriedly. Losing the mare and her foal would be a big financial blow. Kaya smiled, that quiet, confident smile she got when working with animals. "I help, watch." Over the next hour, James watched Kaya work with the mare. She sang to her, touched her gently, moved her hands over the horse's swollen belly in patterns that seemed random but clearly weren't. Slowly, impossibly, the mare calmed down. The panic left her eyes. 3 days later, the mare gave birth to a healthy foal. It shouldn't have been possible. But somehow Kaya had helped the baby turn into the right position just by touch and patience. Word spread fast about this latest miracle. Soon, ranchers from all over the territory were bringing their problem animals to Kaya. Some offered to pay in money. Others brought trade goods. A few just showed up and hoped she'd help out of kindness, and usually she did. Kaya never turned away someone who needed help, but she made one thing clear to everyone. "I am not servant. I am partner. You respect me, I help. You treat me bad, you leave." Most people respected that. A few didn't, and they learned quickly that Desba would back her sister up without hesitation. One rancher tried to grab Kaya's arm when she turned away from his sick horse, saying he'd paid good money and deserved her help. Desba appeared out of nowhere, knife in hand, and suggested he remove his hand before he lost it. The rancher learned to ask politely after that. James found himself learning from both sisters in different ways. Kaya taught him patience with animals. Desba taught him strategy and awareness. She could read situations like some people read books, always knowing who could be trusted and who couldn't. "That man who came yesterday," Desba said one evening as they ate dinner. "The one with the 3 horses. Thompson?" James asked. "Seemed nice enough." "Too nice," Desba said. "He smiled too much. Asked too many questions about how many Apache come here, when they come, where they go. He wasn't really interested in horses." James thought about it. She was right. Thompson had been very curious about things that weren't his business. "You think he was spying?" James asked. "Maybe for Sutton," Desba suggested. "Maybe for Army. Either way, we watch him if he comes back." This was how they worked now. James handled the business and legal side. Kaya handled the animals. Desba handled security and strategy. Together they covered all the bases. As winter deepened, Natan and several families from his band asked if they could camp closer to the ranch. The mountains were brutal in deep winter, and some of the elderly and children were struggling with the cold. James didn't hesitate. "Of course. We'll make room." They set up a winter camp about a quarter-mile from the main cabin, close enough for protection but far enough for privacy. The Apache built shelters that amazed James with their efficiency, using materials from the land and staying warm with minimal fire. In exchange for the safe camping spot, the Apache shared their knowledge freely. They showed James how to insulate his cabin better using dried grass and mud plaster. They taught him which trees made the best firewood that burned longest and hottest. They shared food preservation techniques that were far better than his own methods. One particularly harsh night, when the temperature dropped dangerously low, everyone crowded into James's cabin. 30 people in a space meant for one. It should have been miserable. Instead, it became one of James's favorite memories. The Apache told stories. Long, elaborate stories about trickster coyotes and wise ravens. About great warriors and clever women who outsmarted their enemies. The children laughed. The elders nodded along, adding details. Then someone asked James to tell a story from his people. He felt embarrassed at first. He wasn't much of a storyteller, but he tried, telling them about Paul Bunyan and his blue ox, about tall tales from American folklore. The Apache loved it, especially the part about the ox being blue. "Whoever saw Blue Ox?" one warrior asked, laughing. "Your people tell crazy stories." "That's kind of the point," James said, grinning. "They're supposed to be so crazy you know they're not real. Like trickster coyote who steals the sun," Kaya said, understanding. "Not real, but teaches truth." "Exactly," James agreed. Desba sat near the fire, translating for those who didn't speak English. James noticed how she did it, not just word for word, but adding context so both sides understood not just the language, but the meaning behind it. She'd become essential to everything they did. Without her translation skills and her ability to bridge 2 very different cultures, none of this would work. Later that night, after most people had fallen asleep in various corners of the packed cabin, James and Desba sat by the dying fire. "Thank you," Desba said quietly. "For what?" James asked. "For this. For giving my people a safe place for winter. For treating us like humans, not problems to solve." "You're not problems," James said. "You're friends. Your family." Desba looked at him seriously. "You mean that, family?" "Yeah," James said, realizing it was true. "I do. Somewhere along the way, you and Kaya stopped being people I was helping and became people I can't imagine living without. This ranch, this life, it's better with you here. It means something now." Desba smiled, and for once it wasn't her strategic smile or her polite smile. It was genuine warmth. "You are strange white man, James Morrison. But good strange. My sister and we were right to trust you." Kaya, who James thought was asleep, spoke up from her spot near the wall. "He snores too loud. Not perfect." Everyone who was still awake laughed, including James. "Well, nobody's perfect," he admitted. "True," Kaya agreed. "But you're trying to be a good person. That counts for more than perfect." The winter continued its harsh grip on the land, but inside the cabin and around the ranch, there was warmth that had nothing to do with fires. There was the warmth of belonging, of purpose, of building something meaningful together. James had been lonely for so long after his wife died. The ranch had been just a place to exist, not a place to live. Now it was full of life and noise and purpose. There were always people coming and going. Always work to be done, but work that mattered. Always challenges, but challenges they faced together. One day, a traveling merchant came through. He'd heard about the ranch where Apache and whites worked together, and he wanted to see if the rumors were true. "It's true," James told him. "We're partners. Equal partners." The merchant looked around at the well-kept ranch, at Kaya working with a difficult horse, at Desba organizing supplies with careful precision. He looked at the Apache families in their winter camp, at the children playing in the snow, at the warriors helping repair fence posts. "I'll be honest," the merchant said. "I didn't believe it was possible. I thought the stories were exaggerated. But seeing it with my own eyes, it's remarkable. It's just people working together," James said. "Nothing remarkable about that." "You'd be surprised," the merchant said sadly. "In most places, what you're doing here would be impossible. People wouldn't allow it. The hatred runs too deep." "Then those people are fools," Desba said, joining the conversation. "Hatred keeps you warm for a minute. Cooperation keeps you warm all winter." The merchant smiled at that. "Well said. Mind if I spread word about what you're doing here? Not to cause trouble, but because I think people need to know it's possible." James looked at Desba and Kaya. They nodded. "Spread the word," James agreed. "Maybe it'll give other people ideas. Maybe more places can be like this." The merchant left, promising to tell everyone he met about the ranch. Whether that would bring good attention or bad attention, they'd find out eventually. That night, Natan came to the cabin with concerning news. His scouts had seen soldiers in the area, not a small patrol like Crawford's. A bigger force, maybe 20 or 30 men, camped about 2 days' ride away. "They're preparing for something," Natan said. "Building supplies. Making plans. The spring offensive," Desba said grimly. "Army always comes in spring. After winter weakens us," James felt his stomach drop. They'd known this was coming eventually. The peaceful winter couldn't last forever. "We need a plan," he said. "We have plan," Natan said. "We run, go deeper into mountains. Hide until they leave." "No," James said firmly. "Running means giving up everything we've built. There has to be another way." "What other way?" Kaya asked. "We can't fight whole army." "No, we can't fight them," James agreed. The blizzard hit 3 days after Natan's warning about the soldiers. It wasn't just a regular snowstorm. This was the kind of blizzard that old-timers talked about for years after. The kind that killed cattle and collapsed roofs and trapped people in their homes for days. James was checking on the horses when the sky turned from gray to black in minutes. The wind picked up so fast and hard that it nearly knocked him off his feet. Snow started falling so thick he couldn't see his own cabin just 50 yards away. "Get inside." Desba's voice cut through the wind. She was suddenly there, grabbing his arm, pulling him toward the cabin. They made it inside just as the full force of the storm hit. The wind screamed around the cabin like a living thing trying to get in. Snow piled against the door so fast that within an hour, they had to push hard just to open it. Kaya was already bringing the horses into the barn, but James knew the barn wasn't enough for all the animals. "We need to bring some into the cabin," he said. "In here?" Desba asked, but she was already moving to help. They knew animals. In a storm this bad, animals that stayed outside would freeze to death. They brought in 2 pregnant mares, 3 calves that were too young to survive the cold, and even a few chickens. The cabin became a barn-cabin hybrid, crowded and smelly but warm. As night fell, James heard something that made his blood run cold. Voices outside. People shouting, barely audible over the wind. He grabbed his rifle and went to the door, fighting to open it against the snow. When he finally got it open, he saw figures stumbling through the blizzard. Apache, at least a dozen of them, barely visible in the white chaos. It was Natan and several warriors along with elders and children. They were nearly frozen, having been caught in the open when the blizzard hit their camp. "Get inside," James shouted. "Everyone, get inside now." They piled into the cabin, bringing more snow and cold with them. James counted 13 people, including 2 small children who were shaking so hard their teeth chattered. One elderly woman looked barely conscious. The cabin that was meant for one person now held 13 Apache, 2 tall Apache sisters, One white rancher, 2 horses, 3 calves, and a handful of chickens. It should have been a disaster. Instead, everyone went to work. Kaya immediately took the children and the elderly woman near the fire, wrapping them in every blanket they had. Desba started making hot tea from herbs she kept for emergencies. The warriors helped James reinforce the door and windows against the wind. Natan sat down heavily near the fire, his face gray with exhaustion. "Our shelters collapsed," he said. "Wind was too strong. We tried to rebuild, but—" He shook his head. "Had to choose between dying there or trying to reach you." "You made the right choice," James said. "We'll figure this out together." And they did. Over the next 3 days, while the blizzard raged outside, the overcrowded cabin became a masterclass in survival and cooperation. The Apache showed James tricks he'd never known. They used the horses' body heat to warm the cabin, positioning them strategically. They showed him how to manage fire to get maximum heat with minimum wood, essential when going outside for more firewood was nearly impossible. James shared his supplies freely. The flour, sugar, dried beans, and salted meat that he'd been rationing for his own winter survival became communal property. Nobody took more than their share. Everyone ate the same portions. The children adapted fastest, turning the crowded cabin into an adventure. They played games and told stories, their laughter a bright spot in the howling darkness. Kaya was especially good with them, making up games that taught useful skills while keeping them entertained. On the second night, when the wind was howling its loudest, Desba finally told James the full story of what happened to their band. Not just the attack, but everything that led up to it. "We were not hostile," she said, speaking not just to James but to everyone in the cabin. Some had heard the story before. Others hadn't, but it needed to be told. "Our band, we lived in the mountains for generations. We hunted, we farmed small gardens, we traded with other bands and sometimes with peaceful settlers. We bothered nobody. We asked only to be left alone." She paused, staring into the fire. "Then they found gold in the mountains. Not our mountains, but close enough. Suddenly our land was valuable. Suddenly we were in the way. Soldiers came," Natan continued the story. "They said we must go to reservation far away. I asked why. We had treaty. Old treaty that said this was our land. They said treaty was old, not good anymore. New government, new rules. My father tried to negotiate," Desba said. "He is good at talking, at finding peaceful solutions. He thought we could make them understand. We were not at war with them. We wanted only to stay in our home." Kaya spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "I was with the children when the shooting started, teaching them to ride. We heard the guns, ran back to camp, saw soldiers shooting at people who were not fighting, not running, just trying to protect their families." "My wife," one of the warriors said quietly. His name was Tarek, and James had seen him around but never really talked to him. "She was making bread. She had no weapon. They shot her anyway." The cabin was silent except for the wind outside. Even the children had stopped playing to listen. "Desba and Kaya, they organized the defense," Natan said with pride. "My daughters, they are not just strong in body. They are strong in spirit. They got people to safety, made the soldiers think twice about following. We killed 3 soldiers," Desba said bluntly. "This is true. But they had killed 8 of our people. 8 who were doing nothing but living their lives. We defended ourselves. This is not murder. This is survival." James felt anger burning in his chest, not at the Apache but at the injustice of it all. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "The authorities, the newspapers?" Natan laughed bitterly. "Who would listen? Apache word against soldier word? We know how that story ends." He was right, and James knew it. In a dispute between the army and the Apache would always be blamed, always be the villains. The truth didn't matter when people had already decided who was good and who was evil. "Then we changed the story," James said. "How?" Desba asked. "We document everything. We write it down. We get witnesses. When this blizzard ends, we don't just survive. We fight back with the truth. Truth is weak," Tarek said. "Bullets are strong. Bullets win battles," James agreed. "But truth wins wars. It just takes longer." They talked deep into the night, planning. James would write everything down, get it notarized, send copies to newspapers and politicians. They'd find sympathetic voices in the government. They'd tell the real story of what happened. It was a long shot. Maybe it wouldn't work. But it was better than just running and hiding forever. On the third day, the blizzard finally broke. The sun came out painfully bright on the white snow. The world looked completely different, buried under drifts taller than a man. Everyone worked together to dig out. The Apache showed incredible resilience, laughing and joking as they shoveled snow despite having lost so much. Their shelters were destroyed, but they were alive. That mattered more than any possessions. A neighboring rancher, a man named Bill Henderson who James barely knew, showed up that afternoon. He'd ridden over to check if James had survived the storm. When he saw the Apache camp, saw the crowded cabin, his face went through several emotions. "Morrison," he said carefully, "you got a lot of company." "Storm caught them in the open," James explained. "Couldn't very well let them freeze to death." Henderson looked at the Apache, at the children playing in the snow, at the warriors helping rebuild damaged structures. He'd probably heard the rumors about James's ranch, but seeing it was different. "That was decent of you," Henderson finally said. "Not sure I'd have done the same, being honest. But it was decent. These are good people, Bill," James said. "They're just trying to survive." Henderson nodded slowly. "Got a ranch hand went missing in the storm. You seen anyone?" "No, but we'll help look," James offered. "We?" Henderson asked. "All of us," James said firmly. "If there's someone out there in trouble, we all help." Natan gathered several warriors. They were expert trackers, far better than any white rancher. Within 3 hours, they'd found Henderson's ranch hand, half frozen but alive in a snowdrift 2 miles away. When they brought him back to Henderson's ranch, the man was crying with relief. "They saved my life," he kept saying. "The Apache saved my life." Word of this spread fast. It was one thing to hear about James Morrison working with the Apache. It was another thing entirely to see Apache warriors risking themselves to save a white ranch hand they'd never met before. Henderson came back to James's ranch the next day with supplies. "Food, blankets, medicine. For your friends," he said gruffly. "For saving my man." It was a small thing, one rancher showing kindness, but it mattered. It showed that minds could change, that prejudices could be broken down. Over the next week, as they all worked to rebuild what the blizzard destroyed, James noticed something. The division between his cabin and their camp was blurring. Apache and white worked side by side without thinking about it. Meals were shared. Tools were passed back and forth. Children played together despite language barriers. Kaya taught James's pregnant mare to trust her. The mare that had been wild and difficult became gentle, following Kaya like a devoted dog. When the foal was born, healthy and strong, spring arrived with warmth and hope, but also with the trouble they'd been expecting all winter. Sutton, the wealthy rancher who'd always wanted James's water rights, had been busy during the cold months. He'd been spreading stories, gathering allies, and making plans. The first sign of trouble came from Henderson, the rancher whose hand they'd saved during the blizzard. He rode up to James's ranch early one morning looking worried. "Got bad news," Henderson said without preamble. "Sutton went to the territorial governor. Told him you're harboring dangerous fugitives. Said you're planning some kind of uprising with the Apache." "That's ridiculous," James said. "We're not planning anything except to live peacefully and run a ranch." "I know that," Henderson said. "Anyone with eyes can see it. But Sutton's got money and influence. The governor sent a request to the army. They're sending a captain with orders to investigate. And if they find Apache here without proper authorization, they'll arrest them. Arrest you too, probably." Desba, who'd been listening from the doorway, stepped out. "How long do we have?" "Week, maybe 2, Henderson said. "That's why I came to warn you. Give you time to prepare, maybe hide folks, I don't know." After Henderson left, they gathered everyone to discuss what to do. The easy answer was to run, to scatter back into the mountains, but nobody wanted that. "We worked all winter to build something real here," Tarek said. "Running means admitting we were wrong, means admitting we can't live together. But staying might mean dying," another warrior pointed out. "Or prison." James had been thinking about this possibility all winter. Now he shared his plan. "We don't run, we face them, but not with weapons, with truth, with proof that we're not a threat, that we're a community." "How?" Natan asked. "We gather witnesses," James said. "People like Henderson who've seen what we're doing here. We get statements written and signed. We compile all the documentation about the original attack on your camp. We show them we're not criminals. We're survivors trying to build a life. Desba nodded slowly. It